door of coaches that leave there to go to other programs. When you're successful, people want guys off your staff to try to duplicate that success. And Joel's right, Oklahoma's a good team as well. And but they try to duplicate that success. Bill Belichick has lived with it for 20 years in the NFL. He's always having his staff members get jobs, head coaching jobs at other teams. But what's interesting about Sark, as they call him, is he's been a head coach twice before at the University of Washington, and then he had the opportunity to be a head coach at one of the most storied programs in college football, University of Southern Cal. And he's a good coach. He's a good man. But things went south on Sark when he was in Southern Cal, and he had a drinking problem. He was an alcoholic, and he showed up at functions drunk, very drunk, at functions where boosters were in attendance, and his staff and his players were in attendance, and inebriated. Just drunk off his feet. And obviously they didn't have any other choice but to let him go. And it looked like his coaching career was over. But he got himself together. He got sober. He got a chance to coach with the Atlanta Falcons as an offensive assistant. Nick Saban does what Nick Saban does a lot. He reaches out to coaches that have lost their jobs at other places for whatever the reason, and he gives them a chance for rebirth to start their career over. And he put the hands of his offense, or he put the keys to his offense in the hands of Sarkisian, and we see what he's produced. And he's been able to reinvent himself. He's been able to overcome the problems of the past. And I applaud him. I'm proud of him, proud for him that he now has the chance to run this football program at the University of Texas. We all make mistakes in our life, Avi. There's only been one perfect person that's ever walked this planet. We know who that is, and I'm glad that Steve's been able to put those mistakes behind him and move forward in a positive way.
Well, that's what speaks to me, guys. Beyond the pomp and circumstance of receiving a job, regardless of what sport it's in, just to know that he overcame his issues, and the fact that we're not exactly, as you mentioned, we all make our mistakes. To be I don't want to use that term, I was about to bring that up, but to be chastised and just to be remembered for one fallacy, from one negative aspect of your life, not fair at all. So this is definitely a feel-good story, Del.
It is, and it's not like, it would be a totally different story if you're a guy that's the parts manager at Dick Smith Nissan in Columbia and you develop a drinking problem and you lose your job over it. Very few people know about that. But when you're the head coach of a program like Southern Cal,
it's going to be publicized. Yeah,
absolutely. That's nationwide, if not worldwide news. Everybody knows about it. It's on the ABC Evening News at 6:30. It's on ESPN. It's on Fox News. It's everywhere. And that's a lot of scrutiny that comes down on you. And you don't hide that one. Everybody's made aware of it. And I just applaud him for being able to move forward and put that behind him. And now he's back where he belongs as a head coach at another storied university, the University of Texas. So good for him. I'm thankful the Falcons gave him a second chance. Nick Saban did, and now Texas has as well.
Well, guys, I'm thankful that we're going to go back, just in that proverbial time machine, we're going to go back to the 90s. I'm thankful that a lot of the American wrestlers, yourself included, when they were in Japan, didn't have to worry about the culture, didn't have to worry about the day-to-day, because there were people there that made, I know, your lives a lot easier. And there's one particular individual that I want to bring up. I know a lot of the fans may not know or have heard this name, but we're going to talk a little bit. We've talked about so many different aspects of All Japan Pro Wrestling here on Sunday as it pertains to the career of Del Wilkes. We've talked about professional wrestling matches that you were involved in. We've talked about Giant Baba. We've even talked about different promotions in Japan, such as Antonio Inoki's New Japan. What we haven't spoken about are some little aspects that maybe sometimes they go through the cracks a little bit. There was a man named Joe Oguchi, and this man made your life and a lot of the other Gaijin foreign wrestlers, the American wrestlers, made their lives a lot easier. Is that correct, Del?
Yes, he did. A prince of a man, a sweetheart of a man. And Joe traveled with us, and he was sort of our chaperone, our caretaker. And believe me, when you got a group of guys that are all A personalities and they're, boys can be boys sort of adage, Joe had a tough task at times, but he was like a father to us. And thankful that we had him. And just to give you some background on Joe, Joe was born in the 1920s, I think 1929.
Right.
And he had a background in judo. He was always an athletic guy. And that eventually led to pro wrestling. But that judo background led him an opportunity to get a job. You know, right after World War II, under General MacArthur, we occupied Japan for a few years. After defeating them and getting victory over them in World War II, in the retaliation for December the 7th, 1941, we were able to beat back fascism and declare victory. They surrendered, but we stayed. We stayed to help rebuild that country. That country was in major need of a lot. MacArthur wrote their Constitution. So we had a lot of American soldiers that occupied Japan for a couple of years. And we also had a lot of American citizens that were there as well, helping in that rebuilding process. And Joe was given the job of teaching judo to the American soldiers. He was an instructor for them. To get the job, Joe had to learn English. His real name is Kenji Higuchi. Well, the American soldiers nicknamed him Joe. He endeared himself to them, so that's where the Joe came from. And so later in his life, he transitioned.
And that is the most, just a little history here, to let some of the viewers know, to be referred to as Joe as a foreigner. Obviously, we're talking about Japanese soil, but still to refer to someone as Joe, that's the ultimate compliment, especially back then from an American.
Absolutely. You're exactly right. And if you ever spent any time around Joe, you realized why he was given that name and why that compliment was perfect. But in the mid-50s, he transitioned into professional wrestling.
Right.
Did not have a very good career, very successful career as a pro wrestler, but then became in the mid-60s a referee. And when Baba opened up All Japan in 1972, he hired Joe as his senior referee. And Joe was the head referee for All Japan for decades. Now, by the time I got there, he was still highly respected and, thought of, but a younger guy had taken the place of refereeing those main event matches.
Right.
The Misawa versus Kobashi or Misawa versus Taue or Kawada. Sure. That went to a guy named Wada. We called him Cuppa. He always fetched Baba's coffee for him, so he was always running around with a cup of coffee. So therefore, the word Cuppa. And but Joe did most of Stan's matches.
Right.
Most matches that Stan worked in, Joe refereed those matches. But Joe's primary role was to travel with the American wrestlers. He spoke English. We could communicate well with him. He helped us when we checked into restaurants. He helped us, into hotels. He helped us with our itinerary, our schedule. When we landed at the airport, our bus driver, Iyashi, I don't remember Iyashi's last name, we called him Wrong Way. He did a lot of turning around. So Dr. Death Steve Williams stuck him with the nickname Wrong Way. And I don't think he was very happy with the nickname Wrong Way, but he was very helpful. There was a support system there for us. We're in a foreign country. We don't know the ways of that culture very good. We learn it. I think I did close to 40 tours there. After that, you sort of learn the ways of the culture. You learn some of the language. But Iyashi, our bus driver, and Joe, our chaperone, they're there to help us in situations when we need help. And they're there to guide us. And Joe was wonderful at that. He became a father figure to us. Hello, Doug. Good to see you, man. Joe dipped Skull. He loved Skull. Joe had a hard time getting it in Japan. So every tour, a bunch of us would buy rolls and rolls of Skulls. So Joe never had to buy any. He had a lot of American sports teams clothing, the LA Dodgers. He was a big Dodgers fan because of Hideki Nomo. Was it Nomo?
Nomo, yeah.
Japanese picture. He loved that because of Nomo. So we bought him as much Dodger paraphernalia as we could. I bought him a lot of South Carolina paraphernalia. All the guys did stuff like that for Joe. He was just a precious guy. And so he didn't have to buy clothing. He didn't have to buy hoodies. He didn't have to buy jackets. We bought his tennis shoes for him. We dressed him out. We decked him in the best apparel we could get. He never had to pay for any of his Skull dip. We did that because of our true love and appreciation for Joe. And sometimes Joe's job was made very tough. You get a group of American wrestlers, and they've got an off day in the middle of nowhere, Japan, not one of the big cities like Tokyo or Nagoya or Osaka where you've got a lot to do.
Sure.
But you're in some podunk backcountry town. There's no American TV. There's nothing to watch. There's nothing to do.
That's where you need a guy like a Joe Higuchi.
You better believe it. And the boys can get in a lot of trouble. And we got
Right.
kicked out of a lot of hotels. And I'll never forget it. It was always the same thing. We'd get kicked out of a hotel. And Joe would say, no wonder you get them, kick us out one more time. One more time, they'd kick us out. And Joe would get really upset with us, and he would lecture us. And it was always the same culprits that led to this. I won't mention any names.
Sure.
But Joe had to deal with it. And listen, that's an embarrassing thing for a Japanese. That culture is built on honor. It's built on respect. And when you check a bunch of guys in, American guys into a hotel, and they show their rear end so much that you get kicked out, and he's the guy that the hotel manager goes to, and he scorns, he gets on Joe about it. And so that was an embarrassment for Joe to have to deal with that. And we put him in a lot of those situations, but he was forgiving, he was gracious. And, Avi, not only Joe, but I think of other guys. I don't know if you're familiar with Masa Ori.
Heard of him, sure.
Yeah, Masa is a friend to wrestlers worldwide. He was a guy that made our tours easier on us. He was always there for help. He always made sure that all the American guys at the end of the tour got tapes of all the All Japan Pro Wrestling shows that we could bring back home. It was the only way our families could see what we did for a living. They couldn't watch TV and see us in Japan. So Masa provided everybody with tapes. I've got, hundreds of these tapes, VHS tapes that I could bring back home so my wife and kids could watch what I did. And he also always provided us with the kayfabe sheet, the Wrestling Observer. If your picture was ever in one of the wrestling magazines, Masa made sure to buy it. He would mark the page for you. There were more than just the one Joe. There was more than just Wrong Way, our bus driver. There were guys like Masa as well.
It seems like there was a lot of also, the key word I'm thinking of is consistency and enthusiasm. It almost seemed as if they were happy to be as helpful as they were. Not as if it was mandated from above, but almost it seems like they enjoyed their positions from what I'm hearing. Yeah,
they did. It was an honor for them to do that.
Sure.
And they did it well. That's why I love that company so much. That's why I love my time there so much. And I hold it in such high esteem. They did everything first class, everything. And not just the company and those that represented the company and worked for the company, but even their fans. There was a guy that worked for the company named Tiger. He was one of the ring announcers.
Right.
And Tiger was the same way. He was always there with the bus when we landed at the airport and the bus picked us up. He was there to help, hand out the keys to the hotel, to hand out the itinerary, to hand out the schedule. If you ever had any issues about where to go to eat when you were in a town, we were in Tokyo so much, we got pretty familiar with it, where to go. But some of these towns you didn't go to but maybe once a year. So you would need help in finding a place to eat, a place to work out, a place to tan. And Tiger and Masa and Joe were so helpful in doing that. They made our life so much easier under some pretty tough circumstances sometimes, just because you're so unfamiliar with the city, the town, or the culture itself.
Guys, All Japan Pro Wrestling is an amazing segment that we cover every week, every Sunday, live here on Unmasking the Truth, because we bring it all, whether you want to talk about football, whether you want to talk about pro wrestling, or whether you want to talk about, obviously, what brings us to the song and dance, which we'll get into right now, current events, history, fun games, we cover it all, and All Japan Pro Wrestling, some visual aids. You guys are going to be seeing some videos coming up as it pertains to All Japan Pro Wrestling and the career of Del Wilkes. Definitely enjoyed this segment, just finding out about a lot of people you don't really hear about that are the unsung heroes, in essence, of some of those tours that you were a part of.
They were. And one other thing about Joe, since Joe refereed most of Stan's matches, bless his heart, he had the unfortunate responsibility of following Stan to the ring sometimes. And if you've ever seen Stan's ring entrance in Japan, it was a bull in a china shop. And if you ever touched him, laid a hand on him, he had that big old thick rope, and on the end of it he had a cowbell. And he would go to the ring swinging that thing and hitting people with it. And Joe had scars all over his head from the countless times Stan accidentally hit him in the head with that cowbell, and they would stand out because Joe's head was bald and it shined.
Right.
And so, he got his head busted open countless times. just having to referee a Stan Hansen match.
That